Welcome, friends, to a tale not of joyous parades and backyard barbecues, but of simmering resentment, open rebellion, and the birth pangs of what we now know as Labor Day. This is not just a story of a single event, but a chronicle of the struggles and sacrifices that have shaped the American labor movement. It is a story etched in the DNA of American labor history, a narrative that has been passed down through generations, reminding us of the relentless pursuit of justice and equality. A stark reminder that the path to workers' rights has been paved, not with confetti, but with grit, sacrifice, and the unwavering spirit of those who dared to stand up against oppression, and the echoes of a strike that shook the nation. The Pullman strike was more than just a labor dispute. It was a catalyst for change, a moment that forced the nation to confront the harsh realities faced by its working class. The year was 1894, a time when industrialization was rapidly transforming the American landscape, bringing with it both progress and profound challenges. The Place, a company town on the outskirts of Chicago, built by the Pullman Palace Car Company. This town was a microcosm of the larger industrial world, where workers lived under the watchful eye of their employer. What began as a localized labor dispute would spiral into a national crisis, pitting worker against industrialist, government against citizen, and highlighting the deep divisions within American society, and forever changing the landscape of American labor relations. The Pullman strike was a turning point, a moment that underscored the need for fair labor practices and the protection of workers' rights. This, my friends, is the story of the Pullman strike, a story of courage, resilience, and the enduring fight for justice in the American workplace. To understand the fury that fueled the Pullman strike, we must first rewind to the year prior, 1893. It was a time when the American dream seemed to be crumbling under the weight of economic despair. The Panic of 1893 was not just another financial hiccup. It was a full-blown crisis that sent shockwaves through every layer of society. The Panic of 1893 had gripped the nation, a financial earthquake that shattered the economy, leaving businesses in ruins and workers scrambling for scraps. The stock market crashed, railroads went bankrupt, and the ripple effects were felt far and wide. It was a time of breadlines and soup kitchens, where the sight of closed businesses became all too common. Banks folded like cheap suits, unemployment soared like a hawk on a thermal, and fear, cold and clammy, seeped into the homes of millions. Families were torn apart as breadwinners lost their jobs, and the streets were filled with the desperate and the destitute. The social fabric of the nation was being stretched to its breaking point. The Pullman Palace Car Company, renowned for its luxurious train cars, was not immune to the economic contagion. Despite its reputation for opulence, the company found itself in dire straits. Orders for new train cars dwindled, and the once bustling factories began to echo with the sounds of uncertainty. Orders dwindled, and the company, in a desperate bid to stay afloat, resorted to slashing wages by nearly 30%. This drastic measure was a bitter pill for the workers to swallow, especially since their rents in the company-owned housing remained unchanged. The workers, who had once taken pride in their craftsmanship, now found themselves struggling to make ends meet. For the workers who built those opulent carriages, it was a blow to the gut. They had given their sweat and toil to create the finest train cars in the world, only to be rewarded with pay cuts and financial hardship. The sense of betrayal was palpable, and the seeds of discontent were sown. Adding insult to injury, George Pullman, the company's owner, refused to lower rents in his meticulously controlled company town. The workers were trapped in a vicious cycle, where their reduced wages could no longer cover the cost of living. The tension was mounting, and it was only a matter of time before it would erupt into a full-scale conflict. Pullman, Illinois was George Pullman's grand experiment, a model town designed to house his workforce. This town was not just a place to live. It was a meticulously planned community that Pullman envisioned as a utopia for his employees, and, in his mind, elevate them to new heights of social and moral standing. He believed that by providing a controlled environment, he could foster a more productive and loyal workforce. The town boasted manicured lawns, brick houses, and even its own library and theater. These amenities were meant to create a sense of pride and community among the workers. But beneath this veneer of benevolence lurked a darker truth. The idyllic setting masked a rigid system of control. Pullman, you see, was no benevolent patriarch. His vision of utopia came with strings attached. He was a control freak of the highest order. His desire to manage every aspect of his workers' lives extended far beyond the workplace. Every facet of life in Pullman, from the church sermons to the price of bread, was dictated by the company. The workers had little to no say in their daily lives. Workers, already reeling from wage cuts, found themselves trapped in a gilded cage, unable to escape the oppressive oversight. Their lives micromanaged by a man who seemed to view them as cogs in his grand industrial machine. The dream of a utopian society quickly turned into a nightmare for many, as the reality of living under such stringent control became apparent. Resentment, like a slow-burning fuse, snaked its way through the heart of Pullman. In May of 1894, that fuse reached its end. Workers, fed up with Pullman's iron-fisted paternalism and desperate to reclaim their dignity, laid down their tools and walked out. The Pullman strike had begun. The strike might have remained a localized affair had it not been for the American Railway Union, or ARU for short, a fledgling organization led by a fiery orator named Eugene V. Debs. Debs, seeing the Pullman strike as a microcosm of a much larger struggle, threw the ARU's support behind the striking workers. Rails run dry, the national impact. The ARU's involvement proved to be a turning point. What began as a local labor dispute transformed into a national crisis. The ARU, in solidarity with the Pullman workers, launched a boycott of Pullman cars, refusing to handle any train that carried them. The impact was immediate and devastating. Rail traffic ground to a halt across the nation. Commerce sputtered and stalled. From Chicago to California, the lifeblood of the American economy, the railroads, had been choked. The Pullman strike, once a flicker of defiance in a company town, had become a five-alarm fire, consuming the nation in its flames. The iron fist of government. The government, initially reluctant to intervene, watched with growing alarm as the strike paralyzed the nation. President Grover Cleveland, a staunch conservative with close ties to the railroad industry, ultimately sided with the railroad executives, who painted the striking workers as dangerous radicals. On July 4, 1894, Independence Day, a bitter irony not lost on the striking workers, federal troops descended upon Chicago. Their mission to crush the strike and restore order. Violence erupted. Strikers, their backs against the wall, clashed with soldiers. By the time the dust settled, dozens lay dead, and the strike lay in ruins. Scars and shifting sands, the aftermath. The Pullman strike ended in defeat for the workers, but its impact reverberated far beyond the charred streets of Chicago. The strike exposed the raw nerves of American society, laying bare the deep chasm that separated labor and capital, worker and industrialist. The strike also cast a harsh light on the role of government in labor disputes, revealing its willingness to use force to protect the interests of the powerful. In the aftermath of the strike, public opinion, initially sympathetic to the railroads, began to shift, with many condemning the government's heavy-handed response. Labor Day. A muted victory? Just 6 days after federal troops marched into Chicago, President Cleveland signed a bill making Labor Day a national holiday. The timing was no coincidence. Many historians believe the establishment of Labor Day was a calculated move by the government to appease the working class and quell further unrest. Labor Day, then, stands as a complex and somewhat contradictory legacy of the Pullman strike. It is a day to celebrate the contributions of American workers, but it is also a somber reminder of the sacrifices made and the battles fought in the long and arduous struggle for workers' rights.
Thank you for watching. Hope you found this video informative and entertaining. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. We do like to know and hear your feedback. And if you have the means, please consider supporting us on Patreon, where you can get early access to our videos, and where we post bonus material. Till next time, this is Geeky Tidbits saying cheers and have a good day.